You need to understand something that many people struggle to accept when they find themselves loving someone who has an avoidant heart. Love can feel incredibly powerful between two people and still feel incredibly fragile at the same time. It can feel like the two of you share something rare, something meaningful, something that goes deeper than simple attraction, and yet there is this invisible distance that keeps appearing between you. One moment you feel close, understood, and connected in a way that feels almost magical, and the next moment you feel like the person who was standing right beside you has suddenly stepped miles away without explaining why. You need to understand that when you meet someone who is emotionally avoidant, the connection you feel with them can be very real. The chemistry, the laughter, the conversations that last late into the night, the way they look at you when they let their guard down, those moments are not fake. They are real moments of connection. But for someone who struggles with emotional closeness, those very moments that feel beautiful to you can feel overwhelming to them. The deeper the connection becomes, the more their instincts start whispering that something is dangerous, that they are about to lose control, that if they get too close, they might eventually get hurt. So what happens is something confusing, something that leaves you questioning yourself over and over again. When things feel light and effortless, they lean in. They laugh with you, they open up, they allow themselves to enjoy your presence. But the moment the relationship begins to carry emotional weight, the moment it becomes serious, the moment vulnerability starts to appear, they begin to retreat. They do not always mean to hurt you. They do not always even understand what they are doing, but their instinct tells them that distance feels safer than closeness. And this is where your heart becomes involved in a very quiet struggle. Because when someone you care about begins to pull away, your natural instinct is to move closer. You want to understand them, you want to reassure them, you want to show them that love does not have to be something they fear. You try to be patient, you try to be gentle, you try to give them space while still letting them know that you care. And in doing that, you begin investing more and more of your emotional energy into holding the connection together. You need to understand that many people with kind hearts fall into this pattern without realizing it. They start believing that if they are loving enough, patient enough, understanding enough, the avoidant partner will eventually relax and stop running. They begin telling themselves that the connection is worth the effort, that the moments of closeness prove there is something real there. And those moments do feel real, which is why letting go of that hope becomes so difficult. But there is something important that must happen for a relationship like this to truly work. Love alone cannot carry it. Chemistry alone cannot sustain it. Even deep emotional connection cannot fix it if one person continues running from intimacy while the other keeps chasing it. For the relationship to grow, both people must be willing to step toward each other instead of staying trapped in the cycle of pursuit and distance. You need to understand that loving an avoidant person does not mean sacrificing yourself in the process. It does not mean ignoring your own needs for reassurance, consistency, and emotional presence. It does not mean pretending that their silence does not hurt or convincing yourself that waiting endlessly is proof of devotion. A relationship can only become strong when both people are willing to take responsibility for how they show up in love. Sometimes the hardest realization comes when you begin to see that the connection you feel might truly be special, but the relationship cannot survive unless both people grow. One person cannot carry emotional intimacy alone. One person cannot constantly reach forward while the other keeps stepping back. Love needs movement from both sides. It needs courage from both hearts. When someone with avoidant tendencies begins to face their fears, something powerful can happen. They start recognizing that closeness is not a threat. They begin understanding that vulnerability does not mean losing themselves. They begin seeing that real love is not something that traps them, but something that can support them. But that growth must come from within them. It cannot be forced by your patience or earned by your sacrifice. And this is where your strength becomes important. Your role in the relationship is not to rescue someone from their fears by abandoning your own emotional needs. Your role is to stand in your truth with compassion and clarity, to show love, but also to show self-respect, to care deeply, but not disappear in the process of caring. Because the truth is, when two people who genuinely care about each other both choose growth, the relationship can transform into something incredibly powerful. The avoidant partner learns that closeness does not mean losing freedom. The other partner learns that love does not mean constant chasing. And together, they begin building something new, something healthier than the pattern that once kept them apart. You need to understand that relationships are not defined only by how strong the feelings are at the beginning. They are defined by whether two people are willing to grow into the kind of love that lasts. And when that willingness exists on both sides, even the most complicated connections can become beautiful stories of transformation. Because love, when supported by courage and emotional honesty, stops feeling like something you are constantly trying to hold together. Instead, it becomes something that both people choose to build, step by step, heart by heart, until the distance that once separated them slowly disappears, and the connection that once felt fragile becomes a place where both people finally feel safe enough to stay. You need to understand something that people with big hearts often struggle to accept. Patience in love is beautiful, but patience without boundaries slowly becomes pain. When you are a deeply caring person, when you are someone who believes in understanding others, someone who believes that love means being supportive and compassionate, you can easily find yourself giving more and more of yourself to someone who is emotionally distant. You tell yourself that if you just remain calm, if you just give them time, if you just show them enough kindness, eventually they will relax and let you in. You need to understand that this belief usually comes from a very sincere place inside your heart. You see the good in them. You see the moments when they open up. You see the small glimpses of vulnerability they allow you to witness. And those moments make you believe that beneath the walls they have built, there is someone who truly cares. You convince yourself that their distance is not rejection, it is simply fear. And because you care about them, you become willing to carry the emotional weight of the relationship while they slowly learn how to trust. But over time, something quiet begins to happen inside you. It does not happen loudly, it does not happen all at once. It happens in small emotional moments. It happens when you notice that you are the one always initiating conversations. It happens when you realize that you are the one constantly trying to keep the connection alive. It happens when days go by and you find yourself waiting for a message that never arrives, telling yourself that they are just busy or overwhelmed. Your patience begins to stretch further and further, and you call it love, because you want to believe that loving someone means being endlessly understanding. You need to understand that patience is healthy only when it is balanced with respect for your own needs. When patience turns into silence about your feelings, when patience turns into ignoring your own pain, when patience turns into accepting behavior that leaves you anxious and confused, it stops being love and starts becoming self-abandonment. The truth is that many people with avoidant tendencies do not always realize the emotional impact of their distance, especially if the person who loves them keeps absorbing that impact quietly. So the cycle continues. They step back when things become emotionally intense, and you step forward to reassure them. They go quiet when vulnerability appears, and you become more understanding so they do not feel pressured. They withdraw to regain their sense of control, and you tell yourself that giving them space is the best way to show that you care. And slowly the relationship begins to revolve around their comfort instead of mutual connection. You need to understand that love cannot breathe properly in a relationship where one person constantly adjusts themselves to avoid making the other uncomfortable. Real love is not about walking on emotional eggshells. Real love is about two people feeling safe enough to be honest about what they need. If your needs are always being minimized or delayed because the other person fears closeness, the relationship becomes unbalanced, and that imbalance will eventually begin to hurt you deeply. There is a moment in many relationships like this when your heart quietly asks an important question. It asks whether your patience is helping the relationship grow or whether it is simply allowing the same pattern to repeat over and over again. It asks whether you are being supportive or whether you are slowly disappearing inside a love that never fully arrives. These questions are painful because you care about the person, and the last thing you want to believe is that your effort might not be enough to fix what feels broken. You need to understand that asking for emotional presence does not make you demanding. Wanting consistency does not make you needy. Hoping that the person you love will show up for you in a clear and dependable way is not an unreasonable expectation. These are not dramatic requests, they are basic foundations of a healthy connection. When someone makes you feel like these needs are too much, it often reflects their own fear of intimacy rather than any flaw in you. And this is where something important must change. If the relationship is truly meant to grow, patience must be joined with honesty. Instead of quietly absorbing the confusion, you begin speaking gently but clearly about what you need. You express that you care deeply about them, but you also explain that love cannot survive in a cycle where closeness is always followed by distance. You begin showing that your compassion does not mean you will ignore your own emotional well-being. Sometimes this moment of honesty becomes a turning point. The avoidant partner may begin to recognize the pattern they have been repeating. They may realize that their fear of closeness has been creating pain in the relationship. Growth can happen when someone becomes aware of the emotional distance they create and decides that the connection is important enough to work on that fear. But even if that growth takes time, you need to understand that your role is not to endlessly carry the relationship while waiting for change. Your role is to remain kind without losing your self-respect, to remain patient without silencing your heart, to remain loving while also remembering that love should not constantly make you feel uncertain about your place in someone's life. The most powerful relationships are not the ones where one person endlessly gives while the other slowly decides whether they are ready. The strongest relationships are the ones where both people feel responsible for protecting the connection, where both people care about the emotional safety of the other, where both people understand that love is not simply a feeling, it is a daily choice to show up with honesty, effort, and presence. You need to understand that your heart deserves that kind of love, the kind that does not require you to shrink your needs in order to keep someone close, the kind that does not make you feel like patience is the only tool you have to hold the relationship together. And when patience is balanced with self-respect, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing love, and instead you stand in a place where love can finally meet you halfway. You need to understand something that many people only realize after their hearts have been through confusion. Love can feel powerful and genuine, but for a relationship to truly survive, feelings alone are never enough. There must also be honesty, emotional responsibility, and effort from both people. When these things are missing, even the strongest emotional connection can slowly begin to feel fragile, like something beautiful that is constantly slipping through your hands no matter how tightly you try to hold it. You need to understand that when two people meet and feel a deep connection, it often creates hope inside the heart. You begin to imagine what life could look like together. You begin to believe that this person might finally be someone who understands you. The conversations feel meaningful, the moments together feel warm, and there is a quiet sense that something special is happening between you. These experiences create emotional investment, and once your heart invests in someone, it becomes very difficult to step back and look at the relationship clearly. But in relationships where one partner struggles with emotional closeness, a pattern can begin to develop without either person fully realizing it. One person begins to move toward deeper connection, asking for more presence, more honesty, more emotional intimacy. The other person, often without intending to hurt anyone, begins to pull away whenever the relationship reaches that deeper level. They may still care, they may still enjoy the connection, but something inside them resists the responsibility that comes with emotional closeness. And this is where confusion begins to grow. Because when you care deeply about someone, you often interpret their distance as temporary. You tell yourself that they are just overwhelmed, or that they need time, or that eventually they will realize how meaningful the connection truly is. You keep believing that if you remain loving and supportive, things will naturally improve. Your heart becomes patient because you want the relationship to work. You need to understand that hope can sometimes keep people in cycles that quietly drain them. Hope can make you overlook patterns that are slowly causing pain. You might find yourself explaining away behavior that would normally concern you. You might accept inconsistency because you are focused on the moments when the relationship feels good again. You begin living between emotional highs and emotional uncertainty, always waiting for the connection to return to the warmth you once felt. But a relationship cannot remain healthy when it depends on uncertainty. Love needs stability to grow. Love needs both people to participate in building something consistent. If one person keeps reaching forward while the other keeps stepping back, the connection eventually becomes exhausting for the person who is always trying to hold it together. You need to understand that mutual effort is not a luxury in relationships, it is a necessity. Mutual effort means that both people recognize the importance of the relationship and actively work to protect it. It means both people communicate honestly, both people listen, both people take responsibility when something goes wrong. Without that shared responsibility, one person ends up carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be carried alone. In relationships involving avoidant behavior, effort often becomes unbalanced without anyone intending it to happen. The person who wants closeness tries harder to maintain the connection, while the person who fears intimacy withdraws whenever things feel too intense. The cycle repeats again and again, leaving one partner feeling like they are constantly reaching for something that keeps moving just out of reach. You need to understand that a relationship can only change when both people become aware of this pattern. Awareness creates the possibility for growth. When someone begins to recognize that their distance has consequences, that their silence creates confusion, that their fear of closeness affects the person who cares about them, they may begin to question the habits they have relied on for years. Growth begins with that recognition. But growth also requires courage. Emotional responsibility means facing uncomfortable truths about yourself. It means admitting when your behavior has created distance instead of connection. It means choosing to stay present in moments when your instinct tells you to run. These changes are not easy, especially for someone who has spent much of their life protecting themselves from emotional vulnerability. You need to understand that you cannot force another person to develop that courage. No amount of love, patience, or sacrifice can create emotional maturity inside someone who is not ready to face their fears. What you can do is remain honest about what you need from the relationship. You can express that love requires effort from both sides, not just occasional affection when things feel easy. Sometimes that honesty becomes the moment when a relationship begins to transform. When someone realizes that the connection they have been taking for granted may not survive without change, they may begin to show up differently. They may start communicating more openly. They may start making small but meaningful efforts to remain present instead of disappearing when emotions become difficult. But even if that change takes time, you must remember something important. Your role in love is not to carry the entire relationship alone. Your role is to participate in something that both people value enough to protect. A healthy connection feels like two people walking side by side, not one person constantly trying to pull the other forward. You need to understand that when honesty, emotional responsibility, and effort exist together, something beautiful becomes possible. The relationship stops feeling fragile, it stops feeling uncertain. Instead of constantly wondering where you stand, you begin to feel secure in the knowledge that both hearts are committed to building something real. And that is the kind of love that truly lasts. Not the love that survives on chemistry alone, but the love that grows through mutual effort, through courage, and through two people choosing each other again and again, even when vulnerability makes them uncomfortable, because the connection between them has become something worth protecting.